And you outlined essentially three main areas of that gauntlet. The first is the agency itself. The second is in court, and the third is in Congress. And to a certain extent, at least two of those sort of areas, or there's two aspects of that gauntlet, are expressed in that story. But tell us first about the rulemaking process. What is the sort of the governing statute for that rulemaking process, and how the agencies themselves are the actual, I guess, creation of the rule, how it is subject to being thwarted by interests who would otherwise be regulated by that rule?
Well, it's the entire rulemaking process is overseen primarily by the Administrative Procedure Act and the APA, and that is that I forget exactly when it was passed, but in I believe the 1940s, and it was immediately sort of following the New Deal era, this expansion of agencies in the federal government, and and so it lays out the framework of how Congress passes a law, it's passed off to the agency or series of agencies that will then implement it. Someone actually goes through and figures out which of the lines in the law requires a study, which of the lines requires immediate action, which of the lines gives the agencies discretion to act should they deem that appropriate. And so it shunts off a lot of that responsibility for the actual nitty-gritty lawmaking to the agencies and to the rulemakers themselves. And these are these groups of economists and analysts and lawyers who actually sit down with this material and attempt to write the rules out of it. One major challenge there is obviously in this process, in the notice of proposed rulemaking, which of course this is the federal government, so that has an acronym too. But during that process, it's a big facts gathering period where these rulemakers go out and they try to figure out everything they can about a certain industry and a certain world within that industry, and try to figure out the best way to regulate it, essentially, in following the advice of the rule itself, which is what they have to do. That's the law of the land. But during that time, one of the primary obstacles that they're facing is that a huge number of the studies, if not all of them, coming out of the industry are funded by industry itself, or funded by industry lobbyists, or industry trade groups that are the ones that, frankly, have access to the information about how the bottom line works. And they also have a very explicit interest in keeping the regulators from actually putting any real burden on the industry. And so you kind of have this asymmetry of information that is very real, and rulemakers have to struggle with that. The other part of that process is that during that time, throughout the rulemaking process, before they issue a proposed rule and a final rule, rulemakers are always meeting with people from the public, basically, but most of the time it's industry. As Commissioner Bart Chilton, the one we were talking about from the CFTC before, he estimated that of every 100 meetings that he has, one of them is with a reform group, a citizens group. 99 of them are with industry analysts and people who from, say, J.P. Morgan Chase or Goldman Sachs, or these major financial institutions that have an interest in basically feeding rulemakers information that will behoove them.
Now, we should say that in the case of particularly, I mean, I think I would imagine that particularly when it comes to regulations on our financial system, that disparity is at its greatest. I mean, as opposed to, say, the Affordable Care Act, because there seems to be, just from my own experience, far more advocacy for health reform than there is for financial reform. And so, but I would imagine that there's still a disparity in terms of industry versus reform. And this isn't to say that those regulators are necessarily that are corrupt necessarily. I mean, the revolving door is another issue, but you've outlined two aspects of this that are difficult. One is in the context of the CTFC or other financial regulations, you have such asymmetry of information. It's not just that this makes it hard for the rule makers to do their job, because they probably are aware that the information they're getting is tainted by its source on some level. But it's also, they have to worry about this because this is what could be. I mean, this is essentially, they have a sense of what discovery is going to be if they are sued, right? I mean, that when these are the initial claims by an industry that can undercut the legal status of the law if this industry decides to take them to court.
Right. Exactly. And that's the problem that we were talking about before, where this all ties in together, all three stages of those gauntlets, all three stages of the gauntlet, rather. If there are lots of ways that industry can sue an agency, and one is by saying that they didn't take into account X study that was done. So another thing I write about in this article is the Securities and Exchange Commission's rule on proxy access, which would allow stockholders to vote on the makeup of a corporate board, and that's one of the ways that you can put that stockholders could put the brakes on corporate pay. That's the reason why it's important. And repeatedly, the SEC has had this power to establish this proxy access rule, and repeatedly it has not been able to do so. Dodd-Frank, essentially, the way Dodd-Frank was written, it essentially reminded the SEC and nudged it and said, hey, by the way, you have the power to implement a proxy access rule. Why don't you go ahead and do that? So emboldened by that, it established another proxy access, or wrote the final rule for another proxy access rule, which was overturned by the D.C. District Court of Appeals.
This was a Business Roundtable versus the SEC, and this was a crucial. This was this just happened, I guess, a year or two ago. I remember we talked about it quite a bit on this program, because one of the real issues that we have in this day is that you have a board of directors who basically or a CEO who picks their board of directors. It's so incestuous, they end up in many respects almost double dealing and creating compensation packages for themselves that are sometimes at odds with what shareholders would want for their long-term goals of a corporation. And this was an attempt by outside shareholders to say, we have a right of putting up our own slate of candidates. Instead of letting this process be dominated by the same group of people, so they could deal to themselves. And this was a rule that ended up getting overturned. So tell us how that happened as well.
Exactly, and that's a much better description of the proxy access rule. Thank you. One of the reasons why I bring up that case in particular, is because it illustrates the ways in which industry can use its power to overturn these rules based on essentially minutia, essentially twisting the language of a law and the ways that it's being interpreted, that it has been interpreted over the last few years by a very, very conservative court. In the proxy access rule, they or Business Roundtable and the Chamber of Commerce attacked it on the grounds that the SEC had not adequately done a cost-benefit analysis report, and that makes perfect sense from a sort of commonsensical standpoint. You say, oh yeah, well, before implementing a rule, let's measure the costs and let's measure the benefits. That seems to make sense. That's maybe the way that I operate in my daily life. I'm not going to go out and get a gym membership without thinking about the cost of that on my budget and the cost of that on my lifestyle, and the benefits to my lifestyle, rather. And loses all rationality when it hits the court. And that's the major thing to remember here, is that conservatives are using cost-benefit analysis as a way to overturn whatever rule they want. And that is why Roundtable versus the SEC was such a shot across the bow, because it essentially took this rule that the SEC has complete power to implement, and that Dodd-Frank explicitly reminded the SEC to implement, and then these two very, very powerful industry organizations were able to go into the cost-benefit analysis and say, you didn't consider this one report that we submitted that would say that this proxy access rule would have an enormous impact on industry. And what the judges failed to note there is that report itself had been funded by industry. So you kind of get into this feedback loop where it becomes the absolute absurd, almost on an existential level.
Now, people should understand here that just to talk very generally and quickly about the sort of the ambiguity of a cost-benefit analysis of a rule like this is because to whom are we calculating the cost? To whom are we calculating the benefit? It's completely vague. And of course, the report that you get from the industry is going to reflect exactly their perspective of the cost. They diminish the nature of the benefit. We could argue that there's a benefit, society-wide, but it is a very difficult thing to analyze. And the fact that the court would look at just simply a report about the cost-benefit analysis, which is contrary to making this rule, means that those rule makers going back in time or in the future are going to have to look at a report that is issued by industry in that instance and say, this could sink the entire rule if we get to court, which they will necessarily take us to court. And so we have to deal with this in some fashion. And it's almost impossible to deal with because we don't either A, have the resources to refute it, or B, the terms of which the notion of cost-benefit analysis are so vague that we can't possibly guess what a court is going to set up as parameters. Because when I go to join a gym, I know I'm just talking about my health and my checkbook. It's a fairly simple thing to do, but in the context of this case, the factors are almost infinite.
Exactly. And you hit the nail on the head there, that it's any report that comes out of industry is going to be biased towards industry. We can accept that. And that's fine. In fact, that's part of the democratic process, that everyone is going to be speaking for their own self-interest. But it has to come down. We have to be able to defer to agencies to be able to make those decisions and say, well, this report is clearly biased. And based on this other number of reports, these half dozen of reports and interviews with experts, we believe this industry report to be hyperbolic or to be based entirely untrue. But the point is that discretion has to end with the regulators themselves. It has to end with the rule makers. And right now, it's not. Right now, it's ending with the judges.
And in fact, not only is it ending with the judges, but in fact they don't necessarily even when they ruled in this way in Business Roundtable versus SEC, they didn't even rule on the specifics of the cost-benefit analysis. They simply said because there's a report that says there's too much cost versus the benefit, that negates the whole process, right? I mean, they didn't even get into the granular parts of what they just said. The mere existence of it is enough to sink the rule.
And that's not, and this is all fairly new too. In the early, there's the famous case from Chevron from 1984 says specifically that the courts must defer to the agency's technical experience, to the agency's to the rulemakers' experience in general, and specifically in their experience of these technical issues. And Business versus Roundtable essentially throws that precedent, that extremely important precedent, out the window.